Bienvenidos, buenos días. Es un placer estar aquí con ustedes. Discúlpeme que voy a hablar en inglés. I really was very intrigued by President Ibargüen's comments this morning, particularly a couple of comments that he made where he said, compasses, not maps. In our boot camps that we share, where we share a lot of the things that we're learning with other organizations, recently at the Chicago Tribune, I shared something similar, which is a statement which we make, which is emulate, don't replicate. Meaning, look at everything. What I would invite you to do in the next couple of days is look at everything that is happening across these companies and think about what is the principle I can extract from my organization? How can I emulate it? Sometimes we get overwhelmed and we say, I can't possibly do that in my organization. I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do this because of these reasons. But if you think instead, what can I do? What can I begin testing immediately, like Glenn recommended? What can I do in small ways that would return results quickly and give me information? That is what you ought to do. And so really would invite you to get in the mentality that I also applaud with President Ibargüen, the notion of small tests, the small investments to see where the returns might be, and then follow those that begin to show results immediately. So as I share some of the things that we've begun to see as successful, I would invite you to think of the principles that you would extract and apply to your organizations. So how is it that we've organized for digital success? Let me just give you a quick snapshot of our organization. 5 years ago, we took out of our traditional media organization, which includes a newspaper, a radio station, a television station, and a host of other radio stations, we took out of those organizations our digital properties and put them in Deseret Digital Media as a separate organization. That was based on the principles from the Innovator's Dilemma or disruptive innovation, that in order to take advantage of the new innovations, one has to organize differently. And so the results have been pretty remarkable. KSL.com is a local news site with our local TV brand. It's the #1 local broadcast site in the country. It has more traffic than CNN.com. DeseretNews.com has risen from a top 100 newspaper site to a top 20 website. I'll share more of the financial results here a little bit later. And we found that as we grew Deseret News with a very specific voice, we attracted a broader national audience. So we actually spun out of that organization a new organization focused on a national audience. Utah.com is a travel-focused website. We've grown overall from about 4 million unique visitors across our organization to 36 million. Much of that growth happening from a national, international standpoint. About 3 years ago, we bought the equivalent of family.com in 100 languages. The exception being English. We own that, and it's called FamilyShare.com because Disney owns Family.com, and we weren't able to buy that from them. It was a little bit too high of a price. That network of websites focuses on family issues, parenting, finance, etc. 107 million Facebook follows and growing. So it's really social first. We tend to call it BuzzFeed for families. And then my team, as we've grown as a local and now a growing national and international media organization, we've had other media operations come to us and ask us for content, for services, etc. And so we organized a B2B focused team called Deseret Digital Media Publisher Solutions, and that's the group that I run at DDM. We've seen this slide. This is the United States. This is not healthy data, right? This is not a healthy business environment. Effectively what it says is it took us 50 years to grow to 60 billion in ad revenue in the United States. In 10 years, that went back down to 1950s level with very little growth in digital advertising revenue. So what this effectively says is newspapers did not respond well to the disruptive innovation. The question that I have for us is, can we respond now? Can we recover? What must we do to recover? We believe very strongly in the freedom of expression. I wholeheartedly support the mission of CEAP, IAPA, in its defense of press liberty and freedom of expression. But we must have healthy business models in order to sustain good journalism. And so today, in the next couple of days, we'll be talking deeply about what it will take as leaders to courageously forge ahead with new business models. We can't continue to pursue this path. It hasn't worked and it won't work. And in fact, the challenges grow graver when you consider mobile. So on the far left, you see advertising in print in the United States. What that tells us on the left is actually relative to the attention paid or the time spent in newspapers in the United States, we're far over-indexed. In other words, advertisers are actually spending too much money on print. That's what that tells us, right? That people aren't spending time there, so why should advertisers spend money there? And on the right-hand side, the rest of them, radio, TV, and internet, are fairly well indexed, fairly well in line. Still more money to be spent in internet, but look at mobile. Look at how mobile is way under-indexed. The advertising revenues have not caught up with the attention paid at all. That's both an opportunity and a significant challenge because the ad formats, as we'll discuss over the next couple of days, are not very friendly to mobile. And so we have to discover new ways to monetize mobile. Here's the additional challenge for Latin America. Fastest growing takeover of mobile use, smartphone usage in the world. Now, in terms of overall numbers, Asia leads, but year-over-year growth in Latin America is astounding. The way that people are shifting to smartphones. Now, what's particularly instructive, I think, for us is that many of the first-time internet users in Latin America are going directly to mobile. You know this very clearly. We call it the leapfrog effect, right? They've leapt over one technology to another. For you, that is an opportunity because you can see models emerging from around the world that are finding success in mobile. I just spent a week in Europe visiting with media organizations there in preparation for our boot camp that we'll be putting on in Hamburg this fall, trying to understand what they're doing that's been successful in mobile and what hasn't been. There are models that are growing around the world that are monetizing mobile more successfully. E-commerce, as was referenced earlier, transactions, segmented audiences, unbundled offerings, native advertising. We'll be talking about that on Friday. Lots of opportunities, but we need to begin now in finding ways to monetize and employing them in our businesses. But the challenge is the age-old crisis that any organization encounters when a disruptive innovation comes along. This is the question, really, that faces us. Do we adapt our old business to the new technology, to the disruptive technology? Can we adapt it? Can we adjust it so that it fits this new technology? Or do we have to adopt an entirely new business model? Our contention is that most of the newspaper industry has chosen to adapt. They've tried to find ways to take a square peg and fit that square peg into a round hole. Well, it doesn't fit. Well, let's just adjust it slightly, right? And maybe, oh boy, isn't that terrific? Look, it fit. What's funny about that is not only do we feel that, right? All of us have been in this environment for some time now, and we say, boy, that is really uncomfortable. This doesn't work right. We all know that, right? What's even more tragic is our audience knows it. Our audience looks at us and says, you know, you're not doing for me what all these other organizations are doing for me. You're trying to get me to still be a print customer. You're still treating me like a print customer. You're delivering content in a way that I consumed content 10 years ago. And so we're stuck there. Many of us are stuck there, and it's time to break out of that. The logic here is very simple, and I think it was already referenced. Boston Newsletter in the United States was the first daily printed newspaper. In 1919, 200 years later, the first radio organization was built in the United States, 1919, at the end of World War I. The folks who went through that transformation didn't say, the radio people didn't say, boy, how can we get the newspaper model on radio? They said, no, this is a new business. This is an entirely new business, and we need to create new structure, we need to hire new people. It's a different business. 20 years later, when National Broadcasting Corporation, NBC, was started, they didn't say, boy, let's just do what radio did. Let's just do it exactly that way. No, they transformed and created a new business. If these people were still alive, they would give us this advice. Digital is a new business. You have to have different leadership. You have to have different profit and loss statement. You have to operate it differently. You might use content resources from different sources, including your newsroom, but you have to operate it as a separate business. I promise you they would tell us that because of the experience they had. Here's why. This is the fundamental theory or the basis for the concept of disruptive innovation and the innovator's dilemma. Anytime there is a disruptive innovation, the established organization first sees it as, hey, that's outside my business, not interested, not relevant to me. But then it starts to creep into the business, right? They start to say, hey, that new model, that Google News or that Yahoo or any number of news organizations that grew up early on in the 2000s, hey, that's starting to creep into my space. Ooh, now it's getting painful, right? They're carving out a piece of my market. But all the focus begins to really localize around the displacement. Everybody focuses on that pain point in the middle. What are they taking from my market? Instead of looking at, look at all this growth opportunity. Instead of saying, there's an entirely new complementary business opportunity that I can take advantage of. So what typically happens in the psychology of disruptive innovation is the traditional or established organization says, you know, in order to attack that new market, I'm just going to adapt my old market. I'll just shift into that new market while also protecting my old market. My background's economics and government reform and big business transformation when I was at Forrester. And I can tell you, protection never, ever wins. Markets always find a way. And so protection of the old business model does not work, will not work ever. Instead, you need to adopt to grow. So that's the very basics of the concept of disruptive innovation. How have we organized for digital success? We talk about our organizations in two ways. Transformation A, our traditional businesses, they have to go through a transformation, and then we operate that separately from our digital transformation. So our traditional businesses are operated with the same leadership structure, but also have to find new ways to operate in today's environment. But we have a separate transformation. B is what we call it, Deseret Digital Media, with a VP of products that operates all of our content side products, a VP of ad strategy, VP of ad sales, and VP of marketplaces. Eric Bright, you'll hear from later today. What are our results? Over the last 5 years, we've seen our growth in audience to 36 million plus unique visitors growing every day. Overall engagement improving, 20% growth on an annual basis. All of our growth recently is from mobile. Desktop usage is actually declining, and I've already referenced our Facebook following. So our audience has grown. We've chosen not to employ paywalls. Instead, we've chosen to grow audience dramatically. We believe that the more audience we have, the more we can segment, target, unbundle audience, and so we've aggressively grown our audience. Here are our revenue results. On the revenue side, print and digital are effectively equal. We're overtaking print every month. Both are a little bit larger. I think I've got those equal. That's more than 100%. So much for being the economist, right? Broadcast is now smaller than the other two, but in terms of profits, digital now makes up 50% of our profits. So It's taken a long time. It's a lot of work, but we've seen results. There is hope for your businesses to find success in digital. One of the things that we focused on recently that I think is particularly relevant to you is looking at all of our revenue in terms of mobile readiness. And what we've seen recently is growth in our mobile-ready revenue. That is revenue that applies both for our desktop and our mobile devices. Native advertising, e-commerce, etc. 50% of our revenue now is made up from commerce or marketplace activities, classifieds, deals, club buying, travel, local directories, events. All of that is part of our revenue stream from mobile now. So here's a tweetable quote now that you can use. See, I know my audience. I'm trying to help you out. And hashtag smiley face. To thrive in the waves of disruptive innovation, media businesses must adopt new operating models. We've looked all across the world. We work now with hundreds of publishers. We have a training series we call boot camps where we work in depth with organizations. We've looked at the data over and over and over. There are no exceptions. You have to create a separate organization. Organizations we are watching very closely because they have aggressively pursued these new organizational designs. And we're learning from them as we're also sharing what we've learned. American Interactiva, also known as El Diario de Hoy, in El Salvador, is aggressively finding new ways to organize. GFR Media attended our boot camp, and they're pursuing also a similar model. Schibsted in Norway, you may know them. These are models that I think you ought to also follow. Axel Springer, the Pers Group, I was just with them in Belgium last week. NTM Group in Sweden, they spent a few days with us and we learned a lot from them. Dallas Morning News has gone having a separate digital organization to bring it back in, and now they've spun it back out. Forbes, The Atlantic, and Washington Post are friends of ours. We watch them very closely, and I recommend that you do the same. Good luck over the next 2 days, and buena suerte en sus esfuerzos digitales, and happy to entertain your questions today and then in the successive couple of days. And my email or my Twitter there, but also you have my email address, and happy to answer any questions anytime. Thank you.